All right, well, hello again, everyone. I'd like to now officially welcome you to today's webinar, Translating VISTA Service to Your Resume and Career. I'm Calvin Landrum, a training coordinator with the Corporation for National and Community Service, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. I'll also be facilitating the live Q&A at the end of the session. Joining our production team are Jessica and Indy from our partners at Education Northwest, who will be managing the WebEx technology and will be helping address questions that you may have during the session. You'll probably see them in the chat or in the Q&A if you post things in there. Now, leading today's session, we're delighted to have with us Erin Barnhart, PhD. She's the founder and president of Effective Altruism, as well as the Oregon Community Corps Program Director for NeighborWorks Umpqua. She serves on the board of directors for the Council for Certification in Volunteer Administration and the Advisory Council for Fund the People. She's also a member of the Oregon Committee on Volunteerism, an online instructor with Education Northwest, and an adjunct professor at the University of Oregon. That is a lot of things. Erin, I don't know how you have the time. In previous positions, she served as the graduate program director for IPSL and the director of volunteerism initiative for Idealist.org. A former Fulbright scholar and AmeriCorps ICCC alum, Dr. Barnhart earned her PhD in urban studies, studying international civic engagement. What an impressive resume. Today, we will also hear from a VISTA alum, guest speaker, Ann Oti. After graduating from the College of William & Mary, Ann combined her studies in kinesiology, community development, and public health with her passions for helping others as she served as an AmeriCorps VISTA in Harford County, Maryland. She is now a program associate for VISTA here at CNCS HQ, and I'm very lucky to call her my colleague. Today, we're going to look at how you can prepare for a successful transition out of your VISTA service. Part of that includes being prepared to talk about your VISTA service and just what you did. We'll explore some different ways that you can share your accomplishments to a prospective employer, both in person and through your resume. Along the way, we'll hear from a VISTA alum about her personal experience with this process. Finally, we'll close by sharing some additional resources and end with a question and answer session. So before handing the presentation over to Erin, I'd like to share a tweet sent to AmeriCorps VISTA last spring. So as you can see, even 6 years later, the benefits of serving with VISTA continue to manifest. At CNCS, we wanted to learn more, so we reached out to this alum and learned that after her VISTA service with adult literacy programs, she went to graduate school for public health. Today, she's currently employed as a statistician at a very large research hospital. She says, when asked to explain the connection between her VISTA service and the career benefits, she says, I've been asked about VISTA in every job interview I've been on. My opinion is that my graduate degree is what makes me qualified for the research and statistical jobs I've taken, but the skills that I've gained from my VISTA service may have set me apart from other candidates. So keeping this in mind, I'm so excited to introduce Erin and our guest speaker. They're going to be here today to discuss the best ways to represent VISTA service while undergoing your career search and how to set yourself apart from other applicants. So Erin, take us away.
Thank you, Calvin. I'm so thrilled to be here today. I'm a big fan, obviously, of AmeriCorps and service and love the opportunity to interact with folks on this webinar. So before we dive into the content, we want to ask you guys a few more questions. First, where are you in your year of service? Your answer might be, I'm early in my term of service, I'm in the middle, I'm nearing the end, or you might be an alumni already and you've completed your service. We also want to know if you were in an interview today for a job, for graduate school, whatever it might be, how comfortable would you be describing your VISTA service? Would you be really comfortable? Would you be sort of comfortable? Or would you be really not so comfortable at all? So we're going to ask you to take that poll. There's just about 30 seconds left. About 30 seconds have gone, and we're going to have about 2 minutes. But we're really curious to hear from you. You know, where are you in your journey? Have you just begun? Are you right around in the middle or at the end? The things we talk about on the webinar today, we're going to have tips and suggestions that you can do if today was the first day of your VISTA service or if you finished months ago. At the same time, we really want you to leave today's webinar with some language and suggestions for how to talk to employers and anyone for whom might be making a decision about your career path about, where you are with your VISTA service. So, go ahead and fill out that poll. We're going to see the responses soon here and get a sense of folks who are on the call today. Here we go. So looks like most folks are in the middle or nearing the end of their service, which, is pretty right in the sweet spot here for what we can give you here. Lots of folks are early in service and a handful of alumni as well. Welcome, folks. And if you were to talk about it today, a good portion of folks feel pretty comfortable. That's fabulous. I'm thrilled to hear that. Most folks, though, are saying, I'm, kind of comfortable, could use a few more tips, and then a couple feeling like they really need some guidance here. So I really hope that today's webinar is going to provide everyone here with some great tools and everything you need in order to succeed. Okay, so let's dive in, preparing for the transition. First, we're going to talk about what you can do today to prepare for your professional next steps. One thing you can do at the start is to start building a portfolio. Collect things like writing samples, program materials, social media, outcomes and evaluations, trainings you've completed, software you've used. We'll talk a little bit more about your portfolio in just a few minutes, but you can start to do this today at the beginning of your service, in the middle of your service, and if you've already completed your service, go back and request copies of these materials from your host site. Chances are they've got it all on hand still. Another thing you can do is start to identify careers, jobs, and or degree programs of interest. There's an activity that some colleagues of mine and Idealists came up with that I'm really fond of. And what you do is go to a site like idealist.org or monster.com, Simply Hired, any of the sites where you're going to find job posts. And go through and just find any job that sounds remotely interesting, copy and paste it, set it aside. Don't assess whether you'd really want to do it or whether you're qualified for it. Literally just identify what sounds interesting. Once you have a pretty good collection of jobs that you've flagged, go back through it and say, okay, what is the common thread here? You can learn a lot from that process. It may be you found mostly small organizations with small teams that moved quickly. It may be that you mostly found roles that were running the program as opposed to a member of the team doing the direct service work. So go back through those jobs posts that you flagged and see if you can figure out what are some of the common denominators that made them of interest to you, and that might help you figure out what kind of job you're really seeking. You can also poll your peers, your colleagues, your organizational partners. They're getting to know you pretty well. Where do they think you would thrive? What do they want to do with their own career paths? Where do they want to be 5 years, 10 years down the road? And then consider whether or not you might need or want to go back to school. You can research possible programs, ask for recommendations from things like informational interviews as well as just asking your colleagues. Again, informational interviews. I am a huge fan of informational interviews. These are such an invaluable way to learn more about specific career paths, to get a sense for what it means to do a particular job, as well as to expand your personal and professional network. So effectively, what an informational interview is you're going to ask for 30 to 60 minutes of someone's time to either by phone or in person over coffee or tea to ask them questions about their career path. How did they get to where they are today? What did they study? What do they read? What should you do to prepare for work similar to theirs? So ask colleagues, supervisors, peers, who they know in fields or organizations of interest to you. Also take a look at sites like LinkedIn, see who might be connected to someone you know, and see if they can help open a door. Also, don't be afraid to just flat out cold email people. The worst thing they can do is say no, but most of the time when people say no, it's because they're just too busy, not because they're uninterested in talking about their work. Once you have a chance to talk to someone, ask if they might be willing to share a copy of their resume. You never know what folks might be willing to share, and that can help you get a sense of what to do. And then lastly, request letters of recommendation. Now, I recommend you do this near the end of or after your term of service so that you can get a really detailed letter that's going to really highlight and specify what you're great at. So let's talk a little more about building that portfolio. Here's a list of the kinds of things you might collect for your portfolio, keeping in mind that this can be something you physically create with a binder, or it could be something you host online. You can use a site like WordPress, Google Sites, Wix, Weebly, Squarespace. There's a whole bunch of examples of how you can host online. We're going to take a look at an example now of what one might look like online, and Andy's going to pull that up for us. So this is one example of a digital portfolio. So this is Caitlin White. She's an AmeriCorps VISTA leader, and she created a very straightforward online space to share a bit about her. So you can see that there are distinct sections here for her resume, for her AmeriCorps VISTA service, and for her work. It's really straightforward, very clean, very easy to access. And let's click on that AmeriCorps VISTA link right in the middle there and take a look at what kind of content she has here. So here she has a little bit of information about what VISTA is, a little bit of information about what she has done, what she's learned from it, what her work has been. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on this one example. Obviously, you can Google and see if you can find this as well. Caitlin White on home. Let's click on my work over there on the right as well and just get another look. So here's some projects that she specifically did, as well as links to the final project. Again, really straightforward and really great way to make clear what work she did, what her projects were for VISTA, when she did them, some links to further information, and for an employer or a potential school application, this is a really great tool for them to get a sense for what is her work, what has she done, and how might she be a good fit for us, the person in hiring or making decisions about schools. So building a portfolio can be really straightforward. And fortunately, there's a terrific guide for creating your own portfolio that's called VISTA Portfolio Toolkit, Turning Service into a Career. You're going to find a link to that in the chat window right now. We're also going to put it on the resources slide at the end of this presentation. And again, you're going to be able to get a copy of this presentation. You see in the chat section there that they just gave you some details on how to get this recording as well as a copy of what's going on with this. So again, things to include: writing work samples, program materials, social media snapshots, accolades, kudos, thank you letters, any certificates you've earned. This is the place to really highlight what you've done in your VISTA career. So the next question, of course, is when do you share this information? So let's spend a little time thinking about it. And according to the VISTA Service Portfolio Kit, you might want to consider, first of all, the best time to share your portfolio is when they ask you about your previous work. So don't just walk in and hand it to them, because then it just becomes something that they have to deal with. Wait for a moment when they say, okay, so tell me about your skills, tell me about your experiences. And then what you can do is literally just say, okay, here's an example of a time when I did that skill, or a time when I was presented with a challenge. And then you can share that example from the portfolio to further make your point, and then give them that time to take a look at it and consider it before they move on to their next question. You can also consider handing it to them or giving it to them at the end of the interview as well. So if you're meeting in person, you might bring a paper copy, or you might just bring maybe a printout that has the link on it so that you can hand that to them. If you're meeting by phone, you'll want to make sure you have an electronic copy. Again, something preferably you can share with them live, like a website or even something like Google Docs. If they ask you to specifically bring examples of your work, make sure you do, but even if they don't, have some way to share your portfolio with them. And then share that another example at the end of the interview. With almost every interview I've ever been in, they say, hey, is there anything else you'd like to share or ask? So again, see if you can come up with an example to share with them from that portfolio. And be ready to leave a copy or the link with them. So if you have a physical copy, make sure it's all duplicates of your content. Make sure you don't give them your originals, because obviously you're going to want to hold on to those. So let's do another chat question here. How would you describe VISTA to a potential employer? And this one's a chat question rather than a poll. So put this into the chat box. Make sure you send it to all participants, because we want everybody to be able to see it. And how would you describe VISTA? How would you describe it to a potential employer? How would you describe it to a grad school panel, someone who's asked you, who can make a decision about your career path? What is it that you did in VISTA? What is VISTA? And as people are typing this in, I want you to pay close attention to other people's responses, because chances are they're going to give you a way of describing VISTA that you hadn't thought about yet. So I'm seeing a couple already: an opportunity to apply skills in education, gain experience in training, being a volunteer in service to America, working with a nonprofit in an effort to eliminate poverty and help those in need. Akin to domestic Peace Corps, focus on the elimination of poverty, a way to gain knowledge and skills via service work. So they're really coming in now. So pay attention to how your colleagues here and your peers here are describing VISTA. And Calvin, feel free to jump in here if you see any you want to highlight as well. I don't want to monopolize all of the talking here.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, oh, there they go. They're coming in now. First, I always let them know VISTA is an acronym and then define it. I think that's good. That's a really good jumping off point. A lot of people hear VISTA and they don't really know what that means. You say volunteers in service to America. It sounds very official. Let's see. A way to serve underprivileged communities while gaining skills in and understanding of nonprofit work. I like it. What else we got? Anti-hunger initiative, which allows you to work and serve in your community to build capacity. I think anti-hunger may be particular to your project, but if you can relate, what you did as a VISTA back to the anti-hunger mission, especially if you're applying to a place that is like an anti-hunger, that's perfect.
These are really great examples. And again, spend some time. You can always scroll backwards and copy and paste any that you particularly like. But I really encourage you to be thinking about this, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples and tools right now as well on how to describe VISTA. So what we recommend is, coming up with a 1 to 2 sentence description that explains VISTA to an employer. And we're going to give you an example on the screen here. AmeriCorps VISTA members live and serve in some of our nation's poorest urban and rural areas. With passion, commitment, hard work, and innovative solutions, VISTA members build capacity by creating or expanding programs designed to bring individuals and communities out of poverty. So this is one example of how you might describe it. And we're going to talk in a second about how to talk about capacity building, because the capacity building is one of those terms that every field needs, every organization is addressing, and it's the work that you guys are actively doing or have actively done as VISTA members. So this is a real chance to make your case for how your VISTA service created transferable skills that are good for your next employment. So let's define capacity building on the screen here. Capacity building is a set of activities that expand the scale, reach, efficiency, or effectiveness of programs or organizations. Now, this is something that you learned at PSO. The tasks and activities related to capacity building include things like creating, expanding, or strengthening an organization's systems or processes, as well as the transfer of knowledge, products, and relationships to the staff and volunteers. Examples of what this looks like, so putting it into practice, it's the ability to do more with less. It's leveraging the human, financial, and other resources to meet organizational goals. It's developing internal programs and strategies that make the organization more efficient, more sustainable. And it's participating in resource development and volunteer engagement, again, to help make the organization do more with less, become leaner, become more sustainable, reach more people, achieve its mission more effectively. So those are some of the ways in which people engage in capacity building work. And as you can imagine, you can go to any organization on the planet and say, hey, I can help you do more with less. I can help you to leverage the talents you have on hand. And especially nonprofit organizations, I can assist with things like resource development and fundraising or volunteer mobilization to engage more members of the community to bring more resources to the table. This is the work you guys are already doing. Next up, we're going to talk about translating service to career speak. So specifically, one of the things you should do first is brainstorm a list of the skills you developed, accomplishments and activities you completed or with which you assisted, materials you created, responsibilities you held, etc. The sorts of things you'd list on your resume. But also reflect on your service and identify what were you responsible for. What did you do every day? What did you need to know and or do to succeed in your role? What skills did you develop? What did you accomplish? And then once you have this list of things that you did as a VISTA or you're currently doing as a VISTA, make sure you also consider technical, interpersonal, and characteristic skills. So technical skills might be things like database development, community outreach, volunteer management, resource development, project management. Interpersonal skills might be things like coalition building, experience working with diverse groups of individuals, experience reaching across and working across sectors. And characteristic skills might be things like being mission-oriented, being a critical thinker, having cultural competency, being a quick learner, motivated, outcome-oriented. Every VISTA I know has developed a strong sense of how to be flexible and patient. Those are skills that matter to employers, being innovative and dedicated. So once you have this massive list, we're going to start to talk about how you make it career ready. So again, we have another chat question for you guys and another opportunity for you to learn from your peers here in this chat column. And that is, what skills and experiences have you gained during your VISTA service? And again, make sure you put it in the chat box and send to all participants.
I think immediately some of this patience, yeah. Managing up. I like managing up. I love that. We did an entire webinar on managing up. I hope you watched that. If you didn't, go back and look for that on the webinars page in the VISTA campus. That was a really great webinar. Someone else said managing up. Storytelling in digital formats. That's great. I love that because that's getting more and more important as we, people say, oh, we're entering the digital age. We're in the digital age. We're there. Everything is like online, and I think that's a really important skill to have. Is being able to tell the story of your organization, and show the work that you're doing online and in a digital format. This is gain lots of knowledge, mentorship, marketing with a marketing budget of $0. Andrew, you're hired. That's really great. So this is, what is managing up? Managing up, in a nutshell, would be working with your supervisor to, I guess the way of advocating for yourself to say, these are the needs that I need met in my relationship, with work and my relationship with my personal life. I'm trying to balance work. It's sort of how you interact with your manager and set your boundaries and make sure that your needs get met. And it's just, a way of interacting and having the language to say, hey, I need you to meet with me every week because that's what I need. For my professional development, for me to be able to get things done, I need some input and feedback and sort of managing those conversations and things. Again, we got lots of people who learn lots of patience. Teamwork, being able to push through the no, I like that one.
Yeah, there's some awesome responses here. And again, pay attention to what your colleagues here are writing, because chances are all of you are doing all of these things, and you may just not have had it on your radar of, oh yeah, I'm totally doing that too. So make sure you're copying and pasting or just logging somewhere in your brain, yeah, I need to put that on my list as well.
Yeah, Dinah says, working around high barriers set in my organization. That can be said so many different ways, just depending on what you're doing. I'm able to navigate complex systems. I'm able to, find gaps in systems and make my way through there. I don't know. That's a really good skill to have, I think.
Mhm.
Especially if you're going to work with the government, there's a lot of barriers and lots of walls put up. So, yeah, cool. Great answers, guys.
Yeah, seriously. Thank you so much, guys. So once you have this massive list, which you guys have already begun, you're going to start to do that act of translating service to career speak. So the first thing to do is learn the terms of your desired field or sector. Every field or sector has a language of its own. So what terms are common in their job posts? Use sites like LinkedIn, Idealist, usajobs.gov, monster.com, Simply Hired, whatever site you want to look for, and we're going to have some of those links at the end of the webinar. And go through and read the job posts and see what kind of language they use. What are the acronyms to know? What are the verbs they use quite often to describe the work that they're doing? Also look for examples from resumes from people in the field. What terms do they use? And again, that's something you can ask from people during informational interviews. Also, in those informational interviews, literally ask them, what is the language of this field? What do I need to know? How do I best talk about my work so that people in this field will understand the work that I'm doing? So, and then once you've learned the language of that field, then you're ready to translate your VISTA service to that sector or field language. So how might you describe your skills, experiences, responsibilities to a nonprofit employer versus a for-profit employer, public or educational? And I'll give you an example. The exact same skill or activity translated to each sector. What we call community outreach in the nonprofit sector is marketing in the for-profit sector. And what we call marketing in the for-profit sector is often called public awareness in the public sector. It's the exact same thing. It's communicating with members of the public. It's taking a very specific message and action steps and getting them into the hands of people who care about your organization, your product, your service. But the language is different depending on the field. So learning how to take that language and talk about it in a learning how to take that term or that activity and talk about it in the language of the field is going to tell them that you know how to transfer your skill. You know how to take your talent, your skill, your responsibility, and turn it into something that matters to them, the employer. Okay, so at this point, I want to pass the microphone over, so to speak, and introduce you to Ann O'T. Ann served as a VISTA in 2015, wrapping up service in 2016, and she now works for the Corporation for National and Community Service as a criminal history adjudicator. Ann, we'd love if you'd tell us a bit more about your service and how you've talked about and described it in your past, as well as any tips you might have.
Thanks, Erin. I'm so happy to be here. I served as a Healthy Habits VISTA, working to expand opportunities for underserved youth who lived in a food desert by developing a community garden and healthy habits curriculum in Harford County, Maryland. On a day-to-day basis, I did a little bit of everything: grant writing, volunteer recruitment, landscape design, and speaking to and engaging community leaders and shareholders. When coming up with ways to talk about your service, it's important to note that while these tasks seem broad, it can actually work to your advantage. Like Erin mentioned, you can translate what you did in VISTA with synonyms to match the new language of whatever jobs you're applying to. For example, volunteer recruitment encompasses a lot of different tasks. Depending on the context of your service, it can mean relationship management, stakeholder engagement, or even project site supervision. If you're working on grant writing, you could market that as technical and business writing, financial management, resource development, or it could even be stretched to mean accounting to some degree. Having synonyms for the tasks that you do will help you demonstrate your versatility when speaking about your service. When looking at job postings and seeing what is required, you can figure out how to mold your service around the posting instead of trying to find a position that matches your experience exactly. Another way to gain a vocabulary for speaking about your service is to look back at reports that you or others have compiled and to refer to your VAD. Monthly reports can provide you with both qualitative and quantitative data, essentially numbers and anecdotes, that are rooted in facts that you have gathered. Just like you all, I did so much during my service. With past reports, I could see actual data and stats of who was talked to, what grants I had written, how much money was raised, and I was able to remember what I had actually worked on. What really helped me in speaking about my service and served as the guiding document was the narrative section in the monthly report that spoke to sustainability, challenges, collaboration, and success. If you can't track things quantitatively, start your own narrative section to keep track. Think of specific organizational strategies that you have or are working to put in place to ensure the sustainability of your project. Think about your efforts building and improving partner relationships for your site or organization. Were any of the partnerships established as a result of the project? This will help you speak to collaboration. Think about the struggles you faced and how you were able to manage and overcome them. Have a specific anecdote? Then you've got yourself the answer to the dreaded, what has been your biggest challenge interview question. Finally, think about your successes. What are you proud of having accomplished? For me, I had a middle school garden committee who helped to provide insight in our garden steering committee. There was one afternoon where I had all the middle schoolers look through a seed catalog to have them vote on what fruits and vegetables they wanted to grow in the teaching garden. The top 3 were wine grapes, ghost peppers, and shocking to me, Brussels sprouts. So I asked the middle schooler why Brussels sprouts, and he replied that he had never had Brussels sprouts or broccoli before, and he wanted to see if they had tasted as bad as everyone on TV said. And I knew then that my project was more than just a garden and an outdoor learning lab. The community was going to have an opportunity to access fruits and vegetables that they previously never had access to. So if you're able to write anecdotes and formulate answers to these questions, you will have impressive ways to talk about your service. Your VAD is another good source of information. I was very lucky that my project provided me with a detailed VAD. After getting information together and making a resume, which I'll talk about later, I researched interview questions to make sure that I got practice in. I wanted to be able to give well-thought-out answers. I reviewed the qualitative narratives in my report so I knew I could make the case for the skills and experience I gained, and I thought up anecdotes for potential questions relating to challenges, success, sustainability, and collaboration. One thing I learned during this process is that not everyone knows about VISTA or AmeriCorps, especially in the private sector. So I had to come up with a quick elevator speech of sorts. For example, AmeriCorps Volunteers in Service to America are full-time volunteers who develop sustainable programs to address poverty in the United States. For my project, I worked to expand opportunities for underserved youth who lived in a food desert to access healthy foods by developing a community garden and healthy habits curriculum. So I'm sure you all are doing and have accomplished incredible things. If I could give any advice in sharing your service, it would be to use your VAD and reports. They will help in formulating interview answers. Definitely prepare for interviews. And finally, find a way to describe VISTA and your project that is natural to you. I hope all of these steps will help you better share your national service. Back to you, Erin.
Thank you so much, Anne. I love that story about the Brussels sprouts as well. I had the same thought as a kid that, man, you always hear they're terrible, but yeah, you know, Brussels sprouts as an adult, they're actually quite fabulous. But I love also that it was just that eye-opening moment of, oh, right, here's what the project is about, and here's what I can do next. So thank you so much. It's always so great to hear from people who are actively in their service or just completed it, because it really resonates with the folks who are out there still in the field. So as Anne mentioned, the next thing we're going to talk about here is resume, how to craft a compelling resume. So there are some general tips that we want to share, and then we're going to give you some examples of a not-so-great one and a better one. First and foremost, be specific. Share details. Break your service down into the skills, experiences, tasks, and responsibilities that you did every day. You know, name the organizations and the communities in and with which you worked. Give it specific details to make it real to the person reading it. Don't undersell yourself. Be confident. You know, we're in our culture, we're often taught not to brag. You know, don't be boastful. Don't, you know, be full of yourself. But when you're applying for a job, this is the moment to make yourself shine. Especially folks who've been doing charitable work, we sometimes feel like, well, it wasn't about me, it was about our community. That's true, and that's what motivates our work, but in this moment, this is the place to be confident. You know, talk about what it was that you did, why you are the right person for this role. Wherever possible, quantify your achievements and successes, and I'll give you an example when we show you the example of a good resume, but give numbers to what you've done. How many people did you serve? How many programs did you launch? How many volunteer positions did you manage? Add numbers, and especially if you can show an increase, even if it's from, if you went from 2 to 4 people that you're managing, that's a 200% increase. I hope I did that math right. Make sure you can quantify, because that really resonates with a lot of people. Create a master resume. This is something a mentor of mine suggested, and it was such an excellent idea. And that's basically create one giant resume that has absolutely everything you've ever done in it. All of your experiences, all of your schooling, all of your certifications, your achievements, your volunteer work, all of it in one space. And then each time you apply for a new job, go to that master resume, which is likely going to be several pages, and cherry pick which things matter most to this employer. They may not need to know what classes you took in college. They may not need to know about your part-time job that you had here or there. But there may be very specific experiences you have that are really going to resonate with them. So creating a resume that is tailored to each position, to each audience, is going to make a difference, because to them, then they're going to see a resume that's been thoughtfully crafted, and they're going to see the things that matter most to them really highlighted. And then tailor that resume so that you can best make the case for why you are a great fit for what they need. It's a common mistake in resume writing that we think, oh, they just want to know everything I've ever done. What they really want to know is, are you the right person to hire for this specific position, for our specific organization? So make sure you tailor it and make the case for why you are the right fit. So let's take a look at an example from a resume, and this is a not so good example. We have professional experience, AmeriCorps VISTA. I was a volunteer in Portland, Oregon. I volunteered with Rose City Youth, an organization that runs after-school programs. I managed volunteers and helped create new positions, and I helped with fundraising and grant writing. Okay, this isn't terrible, but it's not great. It's pretty vague. It's pretty general. If I don't know what VISTA is, I'm going to look at this and say, oh, this is a volunteer role. Now, if I don't understand that VISTA is full-time national service, I might think, oh, this is something you did an hour a week in your off time, and, was just something that was sort of off the side of your desk. It's also not targeted for any specific field or job. I'm not sure what position you're applying for here, but I'm not exactly sure how this is going to be helpful to me. Also, the language, the verbs used here are pretty vague and sort of downplay the work that you did. I helped create, I helped with this, use the word helped a lot. Helped is a tricky word. You can certainly use it. In fact, I think we even do in our better example, but when we use it too often, it makes it sound like we didn't have a leadership position. And folks on this call, I know that you guys are serving in leadership positions, so we want to make sure that we give more details. So let's look at a better example. How do we make this a stronger resume? Exact same position, now we're going to give some real specific details. I worked with Rose City Youth as an AmeriCorps VISTA volunteer manager. That's my title. Rose City Youth is who I worked with. I didn't technically work with AmeriCorps VISTA. I was an AmeriCorps VISTA. I committed 1 year of full-time national service to a nonprofit organization serving at-risk youth in Portland, Oregon's Northeast neighborhoods. Specifics tells you a little bit about what VISTA is. It's 1 year of full-time national service. I contributed to the significant expansion of organizational capacity via increased volunteer engagement, fundraising, and grant writing. I recruited, screened, and managed volunteers for after-school programs. So it's no longer a vague, I managed volunteers. Instead, it's here's what I did. I recruited them. I screened them. I managed them. And it was specifically for after-school programs. Here's an example of quantifying. I increased the size of the volunteer program from 25 to 35 active volunteers. In your head, you may think, that's only 10 people. Is that worth highlighting? It absolutely is. I designed and led recruitment and outreach efforts for 3 new volunteer positions. Another example of quantifying. I created these 3 positions and then listing what they are, showing that I brought on board a social media coordinator, a book club facilitator, and a fundraising assistant. And then participating in internal grant writing and annual fundraising drives. So the reason this is better is it gives you a little bit of detail about what VISTA is, make sure that they know it's a full-time national service program, gives a brief description of what VISTA is, it gives a name to your work, and it translates and targets specifically towards this job that you're applying for, that you are the right person, you are the right fit, and that you can bring results. So I'm going to turn it back over to Ann, and Ann's going to talk a little bit more about resume building and how to pull that information from your VISTA service to resume building.
Thanks, Erin. As I mentioned before, your monthly reports are a great source of data. You can get specifics like the amount of monetary and in-kind resources you procured in the form of grants and donations, the number of volunteers you recruited and managed, and other performance measures based on your VAD. When it came to writing my resume, I could use all of this data and VAD language. The first thing I did was just make bullets. For my VAD, I could take an objective like steward and apply for grants and translate it with what I was able to accomplish. Researched and applied for grants, culminating with the procurement of over $35,000 in funding and $10,000 in in-kind donations for the garden project, managed budgets, and maintained financial records. So I essentially had 15 or so bullets in translated or resume speak, my master resume like Erin was talking about. And as I found jobs to apply for, based on the description, I would pick and choose which bullets to use. For jobs that I applied to that were resource development oriented, I made sure to emphasize and use the bullets that were related to grant writing, financial management, building partnerships, and stakeholder engagement. For jobs that were more project management and program development oriented, I focused on my volunteer recruitment, how I planned, tracked, and supervised activities of over 100 volunteers, and bullets that dealt with the development of the garden and the curriculum. If the job description mentioned requiring a lot of research or analytical skills, I made sure to add points that demonstrated the research I did and decision making. For example, I researched grants and funding opportunities. I researched and developed youth gardening and healthy habits curriculum. For descriptions that mentioned collaboration, I made sure to stress the number of partnerships I built and how I involved community members and local leaders in the project. I always keep my first bullet, which is planned and oversaw a community garden initiative serving over 1,000 Boys and Girls Club youth and community members in a designated food desert. Essentially, it's a broad summary of my project. After creating my resume, I had some of my colleagues and family members review it. They were able to give me beneficial feedback from an outsider's perspective with ways to further tweak the language. So to summarize, when writing your resume and tailoring it for a specific position, make sure to use your VAD and reports. I know making the reports are hard, but they really do help you compile the data in bullet points. Thoroughly read the position descriptions. What buzzwords do they use? These buzzwords will guide you in choosing which bullets from your master resume you can add. And use your network. I was able to have family and friends review my resume and even help me prepare for interviews. I hope these tips, along with my tips for translating, talking about your service, will help you all in your job search. Thank you all for the amazing work you're doing across the nation. Good luck on your job search.
Thank you so much again, Anne. Again, it's just so invaluable to hear your specific examples of how you've done this and obviously landed a great position that really uses your talents and skills. So thank you so much. Before we move on to resources, next steps, and then a questions period, I want to spend just a few minutes really briefly on cover letters and interviews. Now, cover letters are, some people think of them as, oh, this is the chance to just, this is what goes with the resume and introduces who I am. And that is true. It is a space to introduce yourself, but it's also a space to make the case briefly for why you are the right hire for them. So to help make that case, plan to briefly introduce what your VISTA program was and what your role was within it, in addition to any other experiences you bring to the position. And again, remember that active language we used for your resume and use similar strategies here. Also be sure to highlight your most relevant skills and strengths as they relate to the specific position for which you are applying. Again, it's sort of that cherry picking of going through the master resume and making sure that you pick and highlight the skills and experiences that are going to matter most to the person reading this letter, and that's the person hiring or making the decision about the graduate school or other opportunity. Now, one of the biggest mistakes I see with cover letters, and I've read a lot of them in my time, is applicants using what is really limited space to explain, first and foremost, why they want the job and why it would be a good fit for their personal and professional goals and aspirations. Now, this is certainly important. You want someone who wants the job and who it fits into their lifestyle and what they want to do next. You have to remember that the reader is most interested in learning how you're going to be a good fit for them. How are you going to fit for their organization's goals and aspirations? So make sure that the tone and the content of your letter makes this case first and foremost. First and foremost, how do I fit for you? Secondary, how do you fit for me? And again, I want to reiterate Anne's suggestion of have other people read it. We can spend a lot of time with something we've written. We think we've nailed it. We've got it perfect. But the fact of the matter is someone else is going to read this who isn't inside your head. And they may, having other people read it, friends and colleagues, they may see something or have questions that you can clear up before you submit it to the person who's making the decision. In terms of interviews, I recommend, similar to we talked about with the portfolio, have those few examples of relevant experiences in advance, and Anne talked about this as well. You know, picking stories from your VISTA experience and other professional experiences that are most relevant for the position at hand, and then practice how you might tell those stories briefly and professionally. Again, Anne had that great example of being ready for the what challenges, or when, can you give us an example of a time when you had experienced a challenge? That's a standard interview question. It comes up all the time, and you can practice for it by looking your VISTA service and saying, okay, I've got an example ready. Also, pick a few talking points, how to explain VISTA, how to explain your role within it, and practice them in advance so that you can answer questions succinctly and with confidence. And practice really does make perfect. So practice these with yourself, practice them in front of a mirror, practice them with a friend or a colleague who's willing to throw a few questions your way and see how you answer them. So we're going to talk briefly now about resources, and we want to make sure, of course, you're going to have copies of this presentation after the fact, so don't feel like you have to scribble these links down quickly, but we've talked about many different resources today, so we've provided a list here. Again, this is going to be on the VISTA campus reporting page for this webinar as well. If you're ready to start searching for potential jobs or doing that research that we talked about to identify what your interests are, you can start with sites like the VISTA job board. Depending on the sector of interest, you might also want to explore sites like Idealist Careers, usajobs.gov if you're interested in public sector work, and if you're interested in for-profit work or nonprofits as well, post to these places, there's sites like Indeed.com, SimplyHired.com, Monster.com. Also, where you're living, you need to take a look and spend some time researching what are the local job boards. So, for example, in Portland, Oregon, there are two sites that folks use. One is a network called Synergy, that people post nonprofit jobs, volunteer opportunities, trainings, et cetera, to, and another is called MaxList, and that's just a space where people post jobs specifically for nonprofit, public, and for-profit careers, mostly around communications and fundraising. Almost every community I've ever lived in has local boards, networks, sites like this. So do a little research to find what is the local site for where you want to ultimately stay with at least with your first career. Some guides to explore. We've got the VISTA Service Portfolio Kit link here. This is the one that we talked about earlier that has examples of how to build your portfolio. Another resource I especially recommend if you're planning to work in the nonprofit sector is Idealist.org's free downloadable The Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers for First-Time Job Seekers. And we have the link on the screen here. If for some reason you click on that and it doesn't work, sometimes they shift things around on their site, just Google the name of the guide, The Idealist Guide to Nonprofit Careers. It's a terrific downloadable PDF that has information on everything from resume writing and informational interviews to how to approach a job interview to how to research activities like the one I described earlier. And then also, if you're considering a next step to education, check out the list of grad fairs hosted by Idealist. Those are often programs specifically focused on careers that benefit the public, from international affairs to social work to environmental science. You might also explore listings on sites like Princeton Review, where you can research by specific program types and schools. And then lastly, I want to draw your attention to previous webinars hosted by VISTA, all of which you can access online. VISTA has hosted several webinars on topics related to today's discussion, including how to apply for federal jobs, how to use your education award, and how to prepare for life post-VISTA. So make sure you access all those resources that we have available on the VISTA campus and on VISTA site so that you can listen to past webinars and find other resources that might be useful to you. So before we get to questions, I want to talk about next steps. And based on how you answered your poll question earlier today of if you're still in your year of service, you're close to finishing, or you're a alum. If you are still in service right now, start building your portfolio. Start collecting the examples of your work electronically, paper, whatever you need to do, and hold on to those so that you are developing your portfolio as you go. Start to research jobs and college degrees of interest. Start to figure out what might I want to do next. Spend some time brainstorming. Do those informational interviews. Have conversations and start to figure out what might a next step in my career look like. If you are close to finishing, do all of the above, plus start to request those letters of recommendation. Start to collect those and have those ready so that as you apply for things, you have them available. If you have folks in your life who say, hey, I don't want to write one in advance, but if and when you need one, just let me know. Still make sure you're asking now so that you're establishing that link so that when you've applied for something, you can go back to them and say, hey, remember when I said I need a letter of recommendation? Now's the moment. And then for the folks on the call who are already a VISTA alum, do all of the above. It is not too late to start now. Build your portfolio, go back to your organization and ask for examples of the work that you did. Research those jobs and degrees of interest, do those informational interviews. Honestly, I still do informational interviews. That's a lifelong skill. And then request those letters of recommendation. So now that I appear to be losing my voice, I'm going to pass it back to Calvin, and we'll talk about next steps on this webinar.
All right, thank you so much, Erin. That was a wonderful presentation. I really appreciate all of the good advice and tips and tricks you've shared with everybody. Before we get to our Q&A, we want to know what you guys thought. On the right side of your screen, you're going to find a quick poll where you can share your feedback about this webinar. So please take a moment to answer those questions. It really helps us a lot. We listen to you. We want to make these as good for you as we possibly can. We want to make sure that we're giving you the content that you want. So please let us know what you'd like to see, how we did on this one, and what could be done better, and also what you liked, and we'll continue to do that. Cool, yeah, so take a second to fill out that poll. So we've given you a lot to think about. Now it's time for your questions. We've been queuing up some questions in the Q&A panel to be answered in just a moment, but I'll also ask our operator to let you know how to ask questions by phone. Oh, maybe our operator, is she there? Operator?
We'll begin the question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please press *1. Please unmute your phone and record your name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. To withdraw your request, press *2. 1 moment, please, for your first question.
All right, thank you. So while we are waiting on questions to come in via phone, we'll go to the Q&A box that we have. So let's see, Aaron and Ann, I may be calling on you guys to give some good answers to these. So our first question comes from, if I can get to the top of my list, sorry, my thing is being funky and won't let me scroll up. There we go. It's from Catelyn Alves. Catelyn says, in addition to informational interviews, would it be advised to job shadow people for a day? How do you go about asking for this experience without sounding pushy? Well, I would start by saying that I think that is a very good idea. That is how, doing an informational interview is going to give you sort of high level, you can ask someone what you do on a day-to-day basis, but until you see it yourself, you don't really know. And I am also not convinced that it would ever sound pushy, to ask someone, hey, can I just check out what you're doing? I'm really curious about your career path. I'd like to know, sort of what you work on day to day to see if it's something that I'd be interested in. People would probably generally be responsive to that, I would think. And I think you'd be able to pick up on it if someone was not into that idea. So yeah.
Yeah, and I might just add to that, if you make the suggestion and you can tell by their body language or their response that they're sort of hemming and hawing, like, maybe dial it back and say, maybe not for the day, how about just for a couple of hours, or would it be possible to come in for just the afternoon? Because folks may feel like, well, if I have you for the full day, that means a full day that I'm connecting with you rather than doing my work, and that might feel like they can't invest the time. So start with the big ask and say, hey, is it possible to job shadow for a day? And if the response is negative or seems vague, then you can say, or just a shorter period of time. I'd really love to see what it's like to work at your organization. So just have a couple of options in mind and try to read their body language and their response to see what's going to work for them.
Right, or if you have like a manager that is like working on a big project, maybe saying, hey, I'd love to help you out with this. Do you have any smaller tasks that I can do that I could just sort of be a part of on this task? Is there a meeting that I can sit in on just so I can kind of check out what's going on and really get at a deeper understanding of your position, of where you're at, and sort of the people and things that you deal with on a daily basis. All right, our next question comes from, I guess we're all losing our voices today. Our next question comes from Charmaine Smith. She said, would you send a portfolio along with your resume when seeking a position? And then the second part to that is, do government jobs allow this as part of the application material? Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually probably would not, unless it's digital and you can just throw a link to it in your cover letter or in your resume somewhere where you can say, for additional information about my background, please check out this site. But as far as uploading materials or sending along documents, I would not. Most people who are hiring for positions, they're already overwhelmed with paperwork, and you don't want to give them a reason to think, oh, that's too much, I can't read that, I don't want to be bothered. I would save it for, use your cover letter as the primary space where you're really making the case for the interview, and then share it at the interview stage. That would be my advice.
Totally, and for government positions, there is not the option to add your portfolio. I guess you kind of do. So when you apply, you attach, there's a box for you to attach your resume, attach your cover letter, and then you can attach additional items. So if you do have a portfolio that is maybe not a website, like it's like a physical like PDF or it's something, that could be printed, then yeah, sure, why not add that to the application? But also to Erin's point, you maybe don't want to overload people in the beginning so that they're not immediately just looking at it and saying, oh, this is too much information, I don't have time to look at this, and then kind of dismiss and go on to the next person. All right, so our next question comes from Ashley Pinamonti, who says, do you have some examples of how to translate service title, example, Outreach VISTA, to a professional title, example, Communications and Outreach Coordinator? You just did it. So list on your resume. So if you look back in the chat, there were some really great suggestions, and I was kind of reading along as you guys were posting and saying, my title is really, really long, do you think that's okay to put on my resume? I think someone was what did they say? They were Veterans and Military Families Resource and Design Coordinator. If that's your title, that's what you did. And I think that gives a lot of insight into your background and your experience and what you did, even just in that title, without having to read the bullet points on your resume. I know a lot about you already just from that title. Sure, it could be shortened to someone say, just Resource and Design Coordinator or Veteran and Military Families Coordinator. You can take out some words if you don't feel comfortable sharing the entire thing. But I would definitely go back and look at the chat where everyone was kind of posting these really great ideas, saying, I think, if you put veterans, in your title, people generally, I think, respond well to that, to people who are working with veterans and military families. If you look at your VAD, it generally will have a title, so it'll say, Community Services Director VISTA or Coordinator VISTA or Volunteer Outreach Coordinator VISTA. So take a look at your VAD and see what kind of language that it uses to describe your position. That's another good way of doing that. All right, so our next question is from Heather, who says, any suggestions on when to begin applying for jobs in relation to when the service term will be ending? This is a question that we get quite a bit. Everyone always wants to know, so when should I start applying for jobs? I know for me, I would say, if you're applying to be a federal employee, like if you are interested in federal employment, you should realize that that process does take a long time. So I would say, maybe 3 months before, just to really start looking, start getting that cover letter together, start writing, those resume bullet points, and start summing up your service about 3 months before. You can even start submitting applications. A lot of hiring agencies in the federal government know what VISTA is or know what AmeriCorps service is and understand that you would have a year term. They understand that there is an end date to your service. So that really works to your advantage. Maybe if you're going, in public sector, I will admit I've never worked in public sector. I've only been a federal employee, so I don't know how that hiring process works. I imagine, and from everything that I've heard, I imagine it to be a little quicker sometimes, or it can be a little speedier because there are less hoops to jump through, so maybe even a little later in your service. But I would say sort of the final 2 to 3 months of your service is when you want to start dusting off that resume, start getting it together, start whipping up those bullet points, practicing your interviewing questions and things like that, and really getting that job search started. All right, let's see. Operator, do we have anyone on the phone?
First question from the phone line. Ty, your line is open.
Hello?
Ty, your line is open.
Oh, maybe we lost him.
One moment for your next question.
All right.
To the year service, how do you?
Ty, your line is open.
Hello, how's it going? Uh-oh, it's getting a little tricky on the phone. All right, maybe we go to the next question on the phone.
I am showing no further questions at this time.
All right, cool. All right, sorry, whoever was on the phone, I kind of caught a snippet of it. I don't know if you want to hit us up in the chat or hit us up in the Q&A. We'll try to find your question and answer it for you. Sorry about that. All right, well, let's go back to our Q&A. I see someone said, let's see, our next question is, 1 second, sorry about that, pulling these up. How long, Aaron, I think this is a good question for you maybe. It says, how long are letters of recommendation good for? I guess the question is, how long could you use a recommendation letter?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say they're good for at least a year, excuse me, a year or two, especially if they're dated. So if I see it, it's 2017 now, if I see a letter coming in that's dated 2016, I'm not going to blink at that. If it says 14 or 15, I might be like, well, that's kind of old. Do they have someone more recent who can speak to their abilities? So I would say, sort of just a quick rule of thumb would be a year or two old should be just fine. Older than that, you might go back and ask for another one, or just because over the course of 2 years, chances are you may have a more recent letter of recommendation or more recent reference that you might want to use instead. So 1 to 2, 2 to 3 years at the most, I would say, if there's a date on it. If there's not a date on it, then I would say you can continue to use it because it speaks about your abilities at that role.
Yeah.
As long as it's still relevant, I would say go ahead and keep using it.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And I think, oftentimes as you get later in your career, things kind of drop off of your resume. So I would be aware of the fact that if you're using a letter of recommendation that is for a position that's no longer on your resume, that could get a little hairy. And along with that, we have another question from Brianna that says, when asking for a letter of recommendation, is it necessary to specify whether it's for a school or a job application?
I don't think so. I think most of the time you're just asking for a general letter that speaks to your talents and abilities. Certainly it's important to note that, the application process is different in different places. As a teacher, as a professor, I've had students ask me for letters of recommendation. Sometimes they need a physical letter. Sometimes they send me a link that I have to fill out a brief survey. Sometimes it's, something online or it's a phone conversation. So, just recognize that whether it's a job or a school, it may have a different process for gathering that letter of recommendation. But if you're literally just asking for a letter, I think what you're asking them for is a general letter that speaks to your talents and abilities that you can share with anyone who's making a decision about your next step.
Yeah, totally. All right, so we have a question from Kayleen. Kayleen says, how do virtual job fairs work? Let's see, Aaron, do you have any experience with virtual job fairs? I have experience doing a virtual grad fair, so I imagine it may work similarly, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've never done a virtual job fair. I've done a virtual graduate school fair, and I suspect it's similar to the one that you've done. So if you want to talk a bit about your experience, I'm sure it's probably pretty similar.
Yeah, totally. So essentially, you kind of like log in. There are a bunch of prospective employers sort of in this digital meeting room, this like sort of digital meeting space. And for the grad fair, you logged in, you were able to see all the different schools that were there, and you get in line essentially to speak to someone one-on-one. So you get in line, and then you get connected with a representative from that school, and you can ask some questions, one-on-one, back-to-back, and they'll, live chat you and talk to you and try to get you to go to their grad school. I imagine that the job fair would work very similarly, that you have the ability to, send your resume over to whoever the employer is. The technology on these virtual grad fairs and job fairs is actually really amazing and really conducive to, the work that you're trying to do, or the goal there, which is to get a job. You're able to send a resume, connect with people, share information, gather, your contact info, and things like that. Let's see. Next question says, how do you recommend translating VISTA Leader Service on a resume? Good question, Matt.
I think I would just approach it the same way, just clearly lay out how VISTA Leader is a different role than VISTA Member, and just make it very clear that this is a leadership position, really highlight what makes it a different position, what makes your role unique. I think that would be my approach. Anne, do you have any suggestions or anything you would add to that?
Really echoing off what you said, looking at what specific skills you're doing. As the VISTA leader, you're managing lots of VISTAs, so you could translate that and focus on the management skills that you've gained and that you were able to show throughout your year.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was going to say. You have the opportunity there to really spend that service as a management role. You are managing, a lot of times VISTA leaders they're writing position descriptions, they are doing recruitment, they are training people, they are placing them, and recommending them for placement in different positions. That is management of people, management of personnel, management of resources. There's a really good opportunity there for you to be able to do that. And for VISTAs too, for you all, for people who aren't leaders, if you are managing people, say that you are managing people. Don't be shy about that. Just make sure that you have the language to back that up. So if you are asked about it, you have answers. But if you are doing the act of managing, you're managing something. Just sort of that plain and simple. But I think even more so as a VISTA leader, you are given additional responsibilities, and you do actually have people who are sort of either reporting to you or coming to you for advice or for different things throughout your year of service. So again, yeah, you have a really great opportunity there to spend that as a management position and to say, look, I did this, I had to do, maybe you helped organize, a large training for all of your VISTAs. You say, yeah, I've done logistics and coordination, I've had to, book speakers, I've, worked with per diem and, within the confines of predetermined, rates. I've had a budget and had to plan an event around that. There's so many things that you can say about that, just about that experience that I think would lend itself to looking really great on your resume. All right, I'll go back to the phone and see if we have any other questions on the phone.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and please record your name clearly when prompted. One moment, please, for your next question.
All right, thanks. Our next question says, a little unrelated, but we'll answer. If you get a job within, well, I think it's not unrelated. It goes back to what I was just talking about. If you get a job in month 10 of your VISTA service, would you still be eligible to receive your education award? I'm really sorry, the answer is no. You do have to complete your full term of service in order to receive your education award. That's your full 365 days. So do keep that in mind, when you do start applying for things. It comes down, if you are offered a position maybe in month 11 and month 10 and a half of your VISTA service, it really comes down to you to advocate for yourself and to negotiate to say, hey, I've got this commitment that I've already taken on. I've got 2 months of this left. Would you wait, for me to start at the end of this commitment? I mean, I think you're able to spin that to say, look, I've taken on this commitment. This is showing you that I follow through with the things that I say that I'm going to do. I really don't want to give this up. There are really important benefits to this for me, that I need and that I've worked really hard for, and I'd really like to see this through the end. I'm working on some projects right now that I can't put down, but once I do, I'm ready to move on and be the best employee for your organization. You can say the things that I'm working on now are going to make me a better employee for you. So hire me, just give me a little bit so I can finish out this commitment and devote myself entirely to my new position. But if you are in month 10 and you finish your VISTA and you end your VISTA service early, you are not eligible to receive your education award.
And I am showing no questions from the phone lines.
All right, thank you. Aaron, so I think this question's for you. In my case, I'm serving my 4th and last year as a VISTA training coordinator for Child Sexual Abuse Initiative. Should I break my accomplishments down per year, or should I include them all in one?
If it's all the same position, I would approach it the same way we do when we've been at a job for 4 years, which is if it's the same title, same position, then leave it all under one bullet point and just, or one category and just bullet point out the various accomplishments, and, that's going to be able to show over the course of 4 years what you've really accomplished. If, however, though, over those 4 years you've been in different roles, different positions, then I would separate them out so that you can show the uniqueness of each one and how you've built upon each one for the next position. So I would treat it just like you would a job. Anytime you change titles, change roles, you're going to give it a new sense of space so that you can show what those responsibilities were and how you built on the previous one.
Good answer. Chadwick says, when is the job fair? The job fair is June 7th. The link that I posted in the chat, it's run by AmeriCorps alums. So go click on that link, and I'm sure that'll have the date, registration info, and all the things that you need. Let's see. Joshua Davis says, if there has been media featuring projects that you worked on, should that be included in your portfolio or your resume, or not at all? So it sounds like maybe you're saying if there has been maybe a TV segment, maybe a news segment featuring projects that you worked on, should that be included in your portfolio or your resume? That sounds like portfolio to me. That sounds like something that you can link to. You can put you can embed a video on your portfolio website to say, oh, this is my project that I did. I don't think there's really a space for that sort of media on a resume. No one's going to click on that in your resume. No one's going to be able to watch that. If there's a news article there, no one's going to look at that on your resume. That is the place, that's the whole purpose of your portfolio, is to showcase all the things that you've done in like kind of real tangible ways, like news articles, showcasing websites that you built for your project, marketing campaigns that you worked on, all those extra things.
And I will add also, depending on what job you're applying to, let's say they're looking for someone who has community outreach skills or something that just has to do with outreach, you could feature a bullet that talks about how the projects that you've done in the past were featured in local media.
Yeah. Totally. Let's see. I don't want to really open this can of worms, but I will address your question, Stephanie. If Congress passes a budget and AmeriCorps is cut, how will that affect VISTA, whose year is not yet completed? The answer is that we don't know, because we haven't gotten there yet. If it does come to that, we will be sure that you're the first to know how any budget changes affect your service. Michelle Dennis, I really like this question because this is tied in with a question that we answered previously. She says in all caps, what if the new position is with the same company? She says, I've applied and interviewed for a new position at my site. I should still ask if I can start after my, should I still ask if I can start after my service date to receive the award? The answer is 100% yes. That is, I mean, they should, they know that you're doing a year of service, like they hired you to do this year of service, so they should 100% be willing to work with you on your start and end dates. Because they also know that if you don't complete your service and you don't get the benefits that you're entitled to, I think that would be really unfair of them to say, no, you have to start in month 11 of your service and forfeit these benefits if you want this job. I think that'd be really, really unfair of them to say. So I would definitely ask them and just say, hey, like you guys, yeah, of course I want this position. I love this organization, I love this company, but I need to finish out what I'm doing. And then, you know, it sounds like if they're going to hire you, there could even not be a break, you know, you wouldn't even have a break in pay. It's just I finish on Tuesday, I can start this job on Wednesday, I will see you guys tomorrow in my new role. But definitely they should, you should definitely ask them. And there really shouldn't even be a question, like they should just know that you're going to start after your VISTA position is over. Let's see, Aaron Barda says, hello, Dwayne Brown. He just said hello in the chat. Hey, Dwayne. Aaron Barda says, it used to be that your resume had to fit on a single page, which is changing. If you're a recent grad with little professional experience but much educational experience, how long should your resume be? I think it's a good question, and I'm going to ask Aaron this one.
You know, it is changing, but I think most employers still prefer the one page, so I would try as much as possible to make it a one really solid, strategic, lean page. If, you know, it bubbles over onto the second, that's okay. Especially, but it just really, the question is, does it need to be there? So if you're throwing everything in because you think it needs to be longer, then chances are someone's going to glance through it and say, okay, I didn't need to know most of that. But if, you know, you need to include your educational experience because it's really relevant to the job you're applying for, then make sure it's in there. So I think the two-page resume is more acceptable, but there is an expectation that you've bumped to 2 pages either because you have too much experience to fit on one or because the experience that you've bumped over to 2 pages for is so relevant to the job that it had to be included.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know, like, my resume is now, it's 2 pages, bordering on 3 if I don't format it properly. I have really got to get my formatting just right so that it all kind of fits onto 2 pages. But yeah, I mean, I'm up to 2, but there are things that are relevant to, and every position that I've had that are relevant to things that I would be applying for. Josh, I like this question. Josh Davis says, is it still common for prospective employers to ask for access to your social media accounts? Is there a guide to scrubbing social media accounts to make them more employer-friendly, ? I am not under the impression that it was ever common for people to just ask for access to your social media accounts. I was always under the impression that they just did it anyway, that once you submitted your name and where you're from or an email address, it's very easy to find you on the internet. And I hope that we all know that at this point, that nothing is sacred or nothing is safe once it's out on the internet. I don't know of a guide. I'm sure that it exists. I'm sure someone has written this. I think it'd be really cool, Josh, if you did it and then shared it with the rest of the community. But if that's too much to ask, I understand. We actually just, on the last webinar that we did, which was, oh man, last month, and it was all about networking. You know, there's some really great tips on there about LinkedIn, and you know, a lot of people now use LinkedIn, you know, as that's their main work social network. I mean, and that's the whole point of it. You know, and we were getting a lot of comments from people saying, yeah, you know, on Facebook, I have everything just set to be completely private. There's no, you know, there's hardly any pictures of me. There are, you know, there's no mention of my job and where I work. You know, and they've really just kind of taken that whole thing to heart, you know, kind of scrubbing friend lists and saying this is really only just for people that I, that I want to hang out with or people that I am, very close to. Yeah, I'm sure there's a guide out there. I mean, I can speak for myself, and I guess I'll ask Ann too. I mean, as far as social media goes and making things more employer friendly, I mean, I don't have listed that I work for AmeriCorps VISTA because I just like, you know, I'd like to keep those things separated, my job and my personal life, sort of, you know, to some extent. And it is like, you know, it's very private. There's not a lot of personal info on there about me. You know, I don't let people just like tag me in random stuff. I don't even post that much, honestly. So like that's it. That's easy enough there. I don't know, Ann, what about you? What do you think about this one?
Same. I definitely don't have where I work on my like Facebook or Instagram. I do have a LinkedIn, but as far as Facebook and Instagram and other personal social media, I try to keep it private. I also try not to get super like controversial or political on my personal accounts as well.
Yeah.
And this is Erin, and the one thing I would add is if you do, so I know a lot of people are using Facebook and other things as activism tools. If you are going to be in that space, just really pay attention to your privacy settings and be really aware of which groups you're in, which ones are public versus which ones are secret or closed groups, so that meaning only members of the group can see it. You know, just be really aware of what people can see, and especially Facebook, for example, you can go in and actually use the tool where it says, look, see what others see. You know, so pay attention to your privacy settings, pay attention to who can see what. And the only example I can think of where someone might say, I want to see examples of your social media explicitly is if you're applying for a social media position, in which case be ready in advance with examples of where you've done that, not in your personal life, but in a professional role, either as a volunteer, as a VISTA, or in a paid position, so that you have examples you can point them towards that aren't your personal space.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. I think that's really good advice. My advice to most people is just keep them separated, and just draw a pretty clear distinction, especially on the internet, you know, of like what you share and what's work and what's not work. But Josh said I'll do some research and update you. Yeah, shoot us an email with whatever you find, and we'd love to share it out broadly if it's something good, if you find something good.
Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, so we're it looks like we're out of questions in the Q&A. I want to go to the phone one last time to see if anyone's there.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1. One moment, please, for your next question.
All right, thanks. So I think we were able to get to all the questions in the Q&A. Let's see, let's make sure we're not missing anything. Kind of scrolling through. Yeah, I think we got to all of them. Let's see, we got one more. Let's see. Amanda Wink says, I would like to continue to work in the nonprofit sector, but I'm having problems finding positions. Where can I look for these positions? There are lots of great resources on the internet. You know, there's Idealist. There are, someone mentioned, you know, sort of nonprofit Facebook groups. Even on Craigslist, I mean, you can look under nonprofit jobs on Craigslist. There's the AmeriCorps Alums job board. There's VISTA job boards. There are, what else? I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. Erin, can you think of any other ones?
Yeah, again, just make sure you find the local sites as well. Use your network. Talk to people of, hey, who do you know who's hiring? Here's what I'm looking for. Can you keep me posted when you see something? And also on sites like Idealist, look for remote positions. There's lots of places that are willing to hire and have positions available that aren't local to your community, especially if you're in a smaller community. That can be a great way to find nonprofit work that isn't necessarily right in your backyard.
Totally. Yeah, and it's really important to use those networks. If you're currently working at a nonprofit, chances are they know other people in that realm in your area. So that's going to be a really good connection for you to have. All right, well, that being said, I do want to say thank you so much to everyone for all of the really, really wonderful questions. It looks like we got a lot. I think we got a lot out of that. This chat, you guys have been really, really impressive in the chat on this webinar. There's been so many great suggestions. I'm watching Tashara, you are crushing it in there. You're just typing away, giving people all kinds of advice. Thank you so much, and thanks everyone for being so active and really helping each other out. I want to point out, so two people just kind of going back and forth, giving advice, sharing resources, and that's what we like to see, and that's why we, like to do these for you all. So before we depart, I want to share some information on an upcoming webinar that we have. The next webinar that we have coming up is creating group volunteer opportunities that engage and inspire. That's going to be on June 29th, 2016. No, not 2016, 2017. We're living in the past here. It's going to be 2017. Check the webinars page on the VISTA campus under Connect and Learn to sign up, and also be looking out for an email with the registration link and all that good stuff. Let's see, any final words, Ann or Aaron?
Not that I can think of. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, good luck. Thank you guys so much for your service, for everything you're doing around the country, and I really look forward to hearing and seeing what you guys do next. So good luck, and keep up the great work.
All right, we'll see you next time.